So, welcome to Industry Night. We built this because there are conversations worth having that rarely happen in the right room, with the right people, in the right setting. Tonight is one of those conversations. So let's talk about why people avoid talking about this subject. What's the actual block towards having these conversations explicitly?
The actual block is a mental one. If you went on the internet, you would find a draft document. If you wanted a contract, if you were buying land and needed it, what would you do? You would find it, you would find a lawyer, you would find a template, because you take it as something serious. But when it comes to estate planning, we don't think the same way. So we know what to do, but we won't do it because of the mental block. And these mental blocks are because of beliefs and norms that we have cultivated based on culture, based on experience, that we're not willing to take the next step when it comes to estate planning.
So what are the myths you hear most often around this? The things people believe about estate planning that simply are not true. Like to do a rapid fire of some of them and tell us why they aren't true.
So the first one, I'm sure even in this room, there are people. Do we know? Or do you want to? What are those myths? Yeah? Most people, you'll be shocked, Pam. Most people think, regardless of how educated they are, most people think the moment they write their will, they're going to die. As a matter of fact, I talked about the family I was on a call with about saying we want to relocate back and help our parents. And you know what they said? As advanced and exposed as these parents are, they said, our parents have said, do you want to kill us? How dare you even ask us to write a will? But these are people who have taken their children abroad. In fact, one of the parents lives abroad. So the myth of, if I write a will, I'm going to die is an actual one. I want to reassure you, if that's your reason, I have been writing people's wills since 2011.
How many have died?
And none is dead. Even for the oldest person, they are still alive. Yeah. The other myth is that, and people vehemently submit around this about estate planning, is that the children should make their own money. How many of us subscribe? No shaming. Yeah, we're going to be truthful. The children should make their own money. I'm working so hard. I need to enjoy it. You only live once. But we have to think about it. Do you want to leave a legacy? Is that your aspiration? Do you want to leave some sort of impact that outlives you? Then can you really say that my children should make their own money? Maybe not. Another myth for the ladies is that my husband will figure this thing out. And then for the men, my brothers will figure this thing out. And I tell you what, from where I sit, when we're dealing with families and administration of estates, you'll be shocked. The people you really expect to take care of your family are the first to disorganize and disturb them and create chaos. And so you have people who'll be like, this, he said this, and so because of that, it should stand. So this whole notion of my brothers will know what to do, my husband will know what to do is another myth that people really consider when not doing estate planning.
And I know this is going to sound very obvious, but I guess we have to touch it. So what actually happens legally when someone dies without a will in Uganda today? Just walk us through the various scenarios and I guess the horror stories that you've witnessed.
So when you don't die without a will, it's even exhausting just thinking about it. When you die without a will, and maybe let me share a story. One story is about my friend's uncle who passes on. And guess what they're fighting about? A death certificate. He had two women, one rushed to get it from NIRA, and the other one needed it. You know you can't proceed to the next step until you have a death certificate. So everyone is trying to hurry to get the death certificate. So the first process when you die without it is we have to get your death certificate. Then we must have a family meeting. as you know, have you ever attended any of those meetings? It's very chaotic. The loudest person, usually an uncle or that brave auntie, carries the day. They will quickly nominate themselves as the interim administrator and dictate what happens to your children and your wife. And so you go through the stages of having those meetings. You go to Administrator General's office, you go to the town clerk's office. Meanwhile, at all these points, you have to gather the list of all beneficiaries. Everyone has to sign. So there is this family. They were living happily ever after until the husband suddenly died. So I had known them from a long time back, and this person was so close to his wife that everywhere they went, the wife was like always in the background, like his shadow. And so when he dies, we're like, oh, what's going to happen to this lady? Guess what happens? Typical African story. So I post his image on my status, and a friend comes to my inbox and says, oh, that is so-and-so's husband. I'm so sorry. And that's not the wife I knew. So that was the beginning of all things. And then we do the vigil and the church service. And these children from different women come up. Then we go for the burial and more children show up. Then we go to Administrator General's office and more relatives show up because they're lining up for the assets. So when they show up, we start listing the assets. But when you go there, you also list the liabilities. So guess what? This man, inevitably, I think because of the lifestyle, was more indebted than he had wealth. And so the moment we started listing the liabilities, the estate started shrinking. And so all these relatives who were lining up just realized there was nothing really to inherit. And so they backed off. And then this woman, the official wife, was left there to battle with all the other children. And so we got letters of administration. So, and that is the long story cut short. When you die without a will, there's so many things, there are so many complications that happen.
So you just leave chaos behind.
Yeah.
So before we go further, for someone who has never done this before,
Yeah.
what does writing a will actually involve? And how hard is it really?
All you need is courage.
Courage in what sense, though?
So this is what usually happens. A client will call and say, Damalie, I was traveling and the flight was bumpy. And then I started thinking about my children. I need to write a will. Yeah? So the mindset. Another one will say, you know what, I attended this funeral, it was so sad. So I need to write the will. So if you overcome the fear, writing a will is as easy as take stock of what you have. Because many of us have assets, but the information is scattered. So take stock of what you have. Take stock of your liabilities, because guess what? When you die, that's the first thing we have to settle. And then take stock of your beneficiaries. So those could be your children, your spouse, or dependent relatives. Those are people that you care for. And so then you sit with someone. At Tara, we designed a tool called an inventory tool where we gather all that information in a very detailed manner, and then we use it to have a conversation about what needs to be done and the guidance around the other tools that are available. And then we really put down your wishes in writing. Yeah.
And then what can a will not do? Like, where does it reach its limits as a document for estate planning?
So what does a will do and what can it not do? So the will essentially distributes your estate. So it will tell us who you are as a person, which is your identity. It will tell us who your beneficiaries are, the assets you have, and how you want them to be distributed. So anything other than that is not covered by the will. So when you just leave a will, under the law, after 2 years, within 6 months, your executors should apply for probate. which is the instrument that court gives to give them authority to administer your estate. By law now, you're supposed to make sure that the distribution happens within a period of 2 years. So after 2 years, ideally, all your beneficiaries have whatever you said they should receive. But you have to think about it, that estate planning is supposed to help build continuity. So if you've distributed the estate, depending on how old your children are and what you want to do with the estate, you'll find that there is continuity. And so that's where all the other instruments come in. But also we know that the will only takes effect upon your death. So before that, there has to be something else that you're doing. There has to be another tool that you're using to make sure that you're building your estate sustainably.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess that's a good segue. Most people think it begins and ends with a will, estate planning. But I imagine you work with a much fuller toolkit. Can you walk us through the main instruments available in Uganda, what they are, and when each one becomes relevant? I did some research. Just the ones I want to hear about, I guess. Wills, trusts, powers of attorney, letters of administration, nominations, cohabitation agreements. I didn't know that was something. Family charters. So yeah, just help us understand the full.
Indeed, it's not just a will that is available for estate planning. So we can start with the powers of attorney. That's a very powerful tool you can use even during your lifetime. What is a power of attorney? We know it for contracts and all those things, but for estate planning, I'll share a story. We had this client who was having moments of mental incapacitation, and the doctor was telling him that because of dementia, he was starting to lose his memory. And so upon examination by a psychiatrist who said, you are not at a level where you don't understand. And so we did a power of attorney for him, where he was appointing his daughter as the person who has authority to access his money, who can sign on his behalf in case of anything. I had another one where the person who was giving the power of attorney, his hand was starting to have issues. So signing in the bank was becoming a challenge, and so through a power of attorney again, his daughter was able to sign for him. So that's one tool that you can use. But also we know that we have staggering statistics around mental health. Yeah, the reports indicate that 30% of Ugandans have mental health issues. We can argue with those figures, but it means that I don't know which side of this room, And so because of that, you can't be fully sure that the next day you're going to have the mental capacity to deal, and yet you need to access this money, especially in a case where there's an emergency. So that's the power of attorney. The other one, which I have sort of spoken about, is the trust. We'll go into the trust later. There's a gift deed or gift inter vivos deed. We know that in our tradition, it's very common for parents to give property to their children. So you say, oh, this plot of land is yours while you're alive, but you don't document it. And so when you die, even when those people are in possession of that property, there is that debate, is it yours or is it not? Yeah? Were you given to just use or to actually own? So the gift inter vivos deed is a good one, where you actually formally give that property to the child, to whoever you want.
While you're still alive, right?
Yeah, while you're still alive, yes. There is another one, which is the couples framework agreement. It's also similar to the cohabitation agreement, where you will realize that there are things we're doing together. Everyone's will is personal, but we are acquiring wealth together, buying these properties together, and you need some sort of framework that guides how you relate together, how you own these assets, and so that's another tool.
Josh, I hope you're listening to this particular.
Please go ahead. Yeah, so, okay, so let's spend a little moment on the trusts specifically. So they come up often, but they're genuinely misunderstood.
Yeah.
So in the Ugandan context, when does a trust make sense? And what does it actually do that a will cannot, specifically?
Okay. So before I get into defining what a trust is, I'll share stories of the different clients that we've supported. So one client, in his will, he said, upon my demise, there should be a trust created. These children should be the first trustees. And in that particular case, he had rentals in one of the suburbs. He said those particular rentals should be put under the trust. And the income that you get from those rentals should be on a monthly basis be given to the beneficiaries. Yeah? So that's a testamentary trust. Yeah? Then in another one, and so for answering the question of when do you use them, in that particular case it was to make sure that this property is not sold by the children, it's maintained within the estate, and that there's regular cash flows going to his beneficiaries. And in that case included his grandchildren and great-grandchildren when they come. So there's that preservation almost for lifetime. The second one is a single mother who has amassed a lot of wealth in billions of shillings, has one son, and you just realize under the law at 18 he's entitled to access this wealth. But you know that at 18 he may not be ready. And so through the trust, you put these trustees who manage this wealth for the sake of that child. So we prescribe milestones to say when he's done with campus, you can give him Tandikwa. When he's about to get married, you give him so much. When he has children, you give him so much, if he has children. And then he has the regular maintenance, tuition, all those things. So you find that, again, for that parent, it makes sense because then these trustees sort of take the role of what the guardians would do and managers, and then they can sort of manage that estate. So it becomes a useful tool for cases where you don't think that the children or beneficiaries are ready to completely take over that kind of wealth. So those are some of the scenarios. Yeah, in simple terms, a trust works in this way. So you have assets that you own, and you move those assets from your individual name to the trust. So a trust is almost like how you do a company. So those assets move into that trust. Then you nominate individuals. You say, I want Ham, who is skilled in this, I want this person. So you come up with a criterion, who becomes a trustee. So just like a company, you have directors, so the directors are like the trustees in this particular case. You give them instructions on how they should manage this, so they can invest. In certain cases, they can dispose of the assets. They can make decisions as though they are directors of the company. And all that they do for the sake of your beneficiaries, who could be your children, your family, or all these people. And of course, their ability to do that depends on the documentation you have in place, the trust deed, the constitution, and the level to which they're held accountable. Yeah.
So let me make sure I'm getting it right. So the will is really about disposing of the assets, giving them out.
Yeah.
But if you want maybe the legacy to live even beyond your immediate, say, what do you call them, dependents, yes, and it goes down to the next generation, the trust is the best way to do this?
To do that, yes. I mean, we've heard about Rockefeller Foundation and the family. We've heard about the Hiltons. Most of those wealthy families, that is how they have established their legacies and been able to hold their estates for many generations.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's some terminology you sort of mentioned. I want to make sure that we understand it properly. There was inter vivos and testamentary trust. What are they, and when does each make sense, or when is each applicable?
So testamentary trust really is a simple term for a trust created within a will, to say that when I die, yes, I've appointed these executors, but after they've distributed some of these assets, these should go to the trust, and this is how it should be managed. So it takes effect after you've died, which is different from a living trust, which subsists while you're still there. The gift inter vivos is really a simple, okay, not simple, but yeah, simply put, it's your agreement to give away officially the gift to whoever you want to give it to.
So this thing, how it sounds like the trust sort of lives on with 20 years even after I've gone. Kenneth, I don't know who of us will go first, but I don't know if you live 20 years after that. If I've left Kenneth as my trustee, there are many questions in there. How do I make sure that even after he's gone, those instructions keep going on? Also, how can I trust this Kenneth guy as well? To make sure that along the way he doesn't, change the direction of the trust and all that.
That's a very valid question, and it's one of the concerns for many people creating trusts. How do I trust that Ken is not going to, turn around? And so, one is it starts with the documentation you have. This is not one thing I'm going to recommend you go on the internet and download a template, because it will end in tears. So you really need to think through the structure of how the trust is going to work. You must put checks and balances. What powers do the children or beneficiaries have? What powers does the trustee have? When can we revoke the trust? Do we involve court? Do we do arbitration, dispute resolution mechanisms? And then there has to be a system of rotation of leadership, yeah? So for some, like the trust, I gave you an example, you said, after 5 years, this set of children should be the ones to manage. And then you'll find for others, they'll say, at this point, my children should be old enough to be the trustees or to be part of the set of trustees. So you must put in place mechanisms to check the powers of the trustee and to sort of project what could happen in the event that the trustees are not there. But also we're getting into a season where we are pushing for corporate trustees, where a company can do the role of a corporate trustee instead of having individuals, because that one is likely to be more accountable, is likely to live longer, is likely to have more statutory obligations than an individual. Yeah.
So you talked about the first step being taking inventory, which is, I think, well understood. What do I have? What do I owe, more importantly?
Yeah.
So I guess once you have a full picture of of that complete inventory, how do you help them think about what it all needs to do? So not just where it goes when they die, but how it needs to work over the next 20 or 30 years for people who depend on them. I think when we were chatting, when we were trying to prepare for this, I think a few weeks ago, you talked about some sort of life cycle analysis.
Yes.
So help us sort of think through, understand that bit.
So oftentimes when you come to a lawyer, when you want to do a will, you just say, Damalie, I want to do a will. But as you discover, the conversation about estate planning is broader than just doing a will. So we just realized that oftentimes, so you start on the process of doing a will, and then the client comes back and says, but I forgot to mention this person. I forgot this asset. So the starting part is the inventory tool, which will get your background information, your beneficiaries, your assets, liabilities, the value, locations, all those things. But for you to really think through what you're going to do, whether to do a trust, whether to do a power of attorney, whether to do just a will, you need to think long term. And so there are tools that we use when trying to guide clients. So the life cycle tool is one of them. So right now, with the life cycle, what we do is we do the projections. Currently, how old are you? So you can even do a mental note now. How old are you? How old is your spouse? How old are your children? So once you have that, then we just keep playing with those numbers. In 5 years, how old will you be? And all these people. In 10 years, how old will you be? In 25 years, how old will you be? Now, it seems like a simple exercise, but it's going to reveal certain things. So you'll find that someone who has a child now who is 10 years, in 5 years, they'll be 15. So you're thinking about what education will they have? So in terms of financial planning, what resources must I have to take them to the school I want them to go to? If your spouse is 40 now, in 10 years, they're going to be 50. What will their health look like? Will they have back issues? Or there are conversations we've had, and someone says, I realized I was paying for gym membership alone, but now I realize in 10 years, my wife's bill, medical bill, might take away all the income I'm trying to save. So then you start to say, I think we need to pay gym membership for 2 people. Another person said, when we started doing these things, and we do that alongside the wheel of life. Wheel of life is really all these tenets that are important, spiritual, socio-economic, and what, that we don't pay attention to a lot because we are focusing on the money, we are tracking that. And so when we did that wheel of life and we went into love and romance and asked, today, where are you in terms of love and romance? He was like at a 3.
What does that mean, 3?
So at a 3, imagine your spouse rating that your relationship is at a 3 out of 10. You're barely there, you're barely going for date nights, you're barely doing anything. And so we asked the question. We did this conversation last year, he was about 45. So in 10 years, 15 years,
You'll be at a 10.
you will be what? Yeah? How old will you be, and how old will your spouse be? And what will really matter? Then you realize at 60, your relationship with your wife will matter a lot. And so he said, so you want to tell me that taking my wife for ice cream today might be the thing that helps her stay by my bedside when I'm sick and no longer as cool as I look. So when you do the life cycle thing, you just start to realize there are so many moving pieces and you can't plan in isolation. And of course, with that, you do the portfolio analysis as well, where you look at the inventory tool has revealed what assets you have. And so you will find that you have a lot of maybe treasury bills and bonds and what, but do you have a house? Will having a roof over your head matter in the next 10, 20 years? Yeah. So it's a deeper conversation. So by the time we come to doing the will, you really have clarity on what's really important. You have clarity on the fact that relationships more than anything will matter, and not just the money. Yeah.
So let's switch gears a bit. For people like Paul Kahero over there, business owners and families with shared assets.
Yes.
What is a family charter, and when does it become necessary?
Awesome. So this is when the family charter becomes relevant. And I'll share a story. There's a family that we are supporting. The old man is in his 60s. He comes from a Muslim background. So he has children from 3 different partners, different generations. Some are in their 30s, some are in their 20s, some are in their teenage years. But he's been running this business for more than 30 years, and now he's at a point where he wants to hand over. The conversations we are having around the lack of clarity in terms of authority, in terms of systems, in terms of where do I fit in? Because again, typical traditional style, I want all my children to work in my business. And some of these younger children are saying, I don't see myself fitting in that business. I have higher ambitions than this business. So where does the family charter come in? Is for this family to sit down, and that's the exercise we're doing, to sit down and say, who are we as a family? So yes, we're in business, but business is a means to an end. That's not who we are. So who are we as a family? What do we stand for? What are our values? And so in one of those conversations, they said, respect is our value. And so we got down to a point of what does respect actually mean? Does it mean just saying yes because he's older? Or can we define it? So once you've done that exercise, the family charter should be able to tell you what the vision of the family is, what the values are, how they've agreed they're going to do things that bring them together. So if it's going to be business, what businesses are we going to invest in? How are we going to invest in them? How are we going to do family meetings? Do we have a family council in place that can make decisions in the interim while we are running around with our lives? So that's really the function of the family charter, to sort of formalize how you work well or work together as a family.
And does this also sort of bring into the succession when it comes to family businesses? So one area that I think we are going to explore over the series, another date is that transition in family businesses. I think it's a very hairy sort of area. But just to bring it back to this, how does the family charter play into things like succession? Okay, if we're running the business together as a family, how does that play into those, our shared assets and how we're going to manage them?
So the family charter is really the framework for the family. But remember, the business usually is a company. On its own, it has members, it will have shareholders agreement, because not every family member might be involved in the business. So the family charter really is talking about the things we do as a family, the industries we're going to invest in, yeah? And then when you're dealing with a business, we have to ask ourselves more pertinent questions. How do family members join the business? What criteria do we use? Is it automatic? Or is it that you're a family member and then you must have certain qualifications? How do we...
What do you mean qualifications as a family member? Just what does...
So let's say it's a manufacturing company.
Okay.
Yeah? And you're a family member. Is it automatic that you should work there? Yeah? You're manufacturing, what example can I give? It's a restaurant. So you're running, let's say, a bar and restaurant as a family business. But you studied pharmacy. So do we really need you here? Or are there skills that you have that we can use? So then we get into drawing a criteria for how we employ family members. And so you find that they're interlinked, but they're not necessarily the same. And so you have to be sensitive to the things that you carry from the family to the side of the business and vice versa.
Okay. Again, switching to what most of us, the biggest asset most people in Uganda hold, which is land and real estate.
Yes.
And it comes with the layers of complexity most people don't fully understand. I guess what should our audience know about how the different land tenure types interact with succession? Is it an issue? Should we have a deep understanding, or is it just buy the land and they'll fight over it or figure it out later?
Well, like you've rightly said, land is one of the assets where we hold our money, our value. And it depends on your circumstances. So a client we were working with, his concern is that I am Indian, but I have since become Ugandan. So I can hold freehold, I can have my law interest. But my wife and children are still Indian. So what happens when I die? You know that legally speaking, they can only hold leasehold interest. And so from an estate planning point of view, then we have to ask ourselves, what must you do so that your children and spouse are protected? So either you concede that they will forever hold leasehold interest, which is a bit risky. Yes, you can have 99 years, but it's subject to renewal. And then it's subject to consent of the lessor, it's subject to changes. Whilst my law interest and freehold are completely held in perpetuity. So then you start to think about those implications. But also we know that we have customary land, which is communal land. In many places, especially out of the city, land is held communally. And so you will have, sometimes even when we're having conversations for estate planning, a client say, but we've always held this land as a family, so we should keep it this way. That hill, I know, my brother knows that's my hill. I know that's his hill. There is no need to put detail into the will, because they will do that, yeah? We'll be able to share it, God forbid something happens. But then you realize that your children may not have that culture background and context where you are owning land communally. And so then you start to think, okay, even if you're going to hold this land as a family, can we at least demarcate and let it be clear that this person owns this? Can we get a title? Can we have an agreement where we are clear that we hold the property as tenants in common? Yeah, and an example I would give you is this family, a couple, They were separated. It's not clear whether they were married or not. It was rumored that they had married somewhere abroad, but they had no marriage certificate. They had children from different relationships. Then they passed on and had a prime property in Entebbe. They passed on successfully, I think successively 1 week after the other from COVID. And so we are in court debating an issue of who owned this property. Because the title has both names, but they were separated. They had been separated for more than 5 years. And now the children of the man who died last are saying, no, but my father died last. So by virtue of that, we own the entire property. If it's a joint tenancy, it means that whoever survives takes the entire interest. They're like, no, my parents, these people held this property as a joint tenancy, and so we take it. And then you'll find, on this side, we're arguing that no, these people never had the intention to have what is called survivorship, which is whoever dies first forfeits their interest to the other one. And so you realize that even when it comes to land, you can't take things for chances. You can't leave things to chance. You have to take precaution. You have to have agreements. You have to have evidence that shows your true interest.
And so you did mention some residential holding, the house I guess you live in. So
Yes.
it's the 2022 Succession Amendment Act that introduced the residential holding protection. What does it actually mean? What changed in the law around that?
So what changed is that every spouse here can sleep soundly knowing that tomorrow if something happened to their partner, no one can evict them from their home. That's what it means, that it gives you a peace of mind, because the law now says, remember those days? I did another matter where in this particular case, the son was evicting the mother out of their home because he said, I'm the musika, and culturally speaking, this is my home. And so he was trying to evict the mother out of that home. So with this amendment, this lady and all her children have a right to stay in that home. In fact, it's an offense where you can be in prison for up to 7 years if you try and evict the people in that household. So it guarantees ownership for the surviving spouse and their beneficiaries or their children.
Right now, going to a lot of people here have sent their children abroad to study, to build careers, to live. And at some point they realize, I'm growing older here. My children may not come back. What does estate planning look like in that reality? But also the reverse is true. You get people who live in the diaspora, but build assets here. What are the specific challenges when an estate spans 2 jurisdictions like that? And what are the things people should sort of have in mind?
So the first one is where you are building wealth and your children are the other side. Yeah. How do we deal with that?
And maybe you're hoping eventually they'll come take over these things. Maybe you built a business and they'll take it on, or whatever your aspirations are in that regard.
Well, I think that that scenario is becoming very common, that all of us, because we want our children to have the best in life, you send them abroad, and unfortunately you've not done the estate planning, these conversations that we're having, you've not thought about the vision of the family and how you should involve them. So again, it has to be personal. It has to be customized. You have to reflect on your children, on your family, and what's possible. Because sometimes all you have to do is to realize that these children are never coming back. There's a family we support. I think they have some prime properties in town, but almost the entire family lives abroad. So they've made peace with the fact that they will not come back to Uganda, and now they're hiring professional managers to oversee the entire estate. So that's one scenario. And so you just have to sort of accept that this is what is happening and we're going to make do with what we have. Others, it's that if you think that there's a chance to start having the conversation, and that's where that family that I started with, that's where they are, where they've all built their careers abroad and now they're realizing, but why are we hustling abroad when there's a lot of wealth here, yet we could just plug in and support our parents, but eventually this business could support all of us. So it's that there's no one size fits all, and that you have to take it on one case at a time. Yeah. The last bit of the question, what was it?
It was the diaspora. People are out in the diaspora. They are, they've built assets here. There must be some specific challenges. But also there's a case in point, and I want you to touch it. Recently we heard of, unfortunately, the couple in Entebbe, who I think had lived abroad for I don't know how long. They moved back.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they are murdered. And then there was a whole fracas around their death, and I believe something around the subject we're talking about.
Yes.
So maybe you speak about it in that context.
So when it comes to the diaspora, the challenges are very different and complex, because we would start with management on its own. Yeah, we know that we've all had that typical story of your working hard. This microphone. So you're working hard abroad and sending money to these relatives, only to come and find that they bought assets for themselves and nothing for you. Or you have cases, again, another story, another family that we support, only 2 people are here and they are relying, the ones abroad are relying on these 2 to manage the estate. So the complications will depend on what relationships you have, your ability to oversee what they are doing, whether you have family meetings or not, the level of power you've given to these people. So things like that will definitely affect the people in the diaspora. But coming back to the case you've mentioned, I mean, there's every sad thing about that story. Because if you know about the Mutaga, that case, that the couple that was killed in Entebbe, we know that they were suddenly murdered. Several months later, no person has been found as an accused person. And so I remember writing an article about it, because whilst they were dealing with the murder, they were also dealing with the issue of where do they get buried. The things we don't ask ourselves, the things we don't leave wills for, because if there's a will, it will be clear. So they find themselves in court, the children suing a clan member and an auntie. And the auntie is saying, and the clan member saying, this man was the head of the clan. In fact, we had had meetings before, and we were planning to have a clan gathering, and that he was a Muganda man, a proud Muganda man. The children are saying no, because of the circumstances, we need to cremate our parents and send the ashes back to Switzerland, where they lived for the most part of their lives. And so, like all these other cases that we've seen, the case of Justice Arach, the case of Bob Kasango, we get into the detail where you're discussed as though you're a piece of property. And we're debating on what should happen to your body. Where do we bury it? And so for them, the judge goes on to say, okay, there is culture and what it stands for, but when you look at the facts before us, the children had a closer relationship with their parents. They had lived together, they were harmoniously communicating, they had a bond. And so on account of the relationship that the children had with their parents, the judge agreed that they are cremated and their ashes sent back to Switzerland. And of course, I mean, like all stories, we read them and think we are the exception. Today I wrote an article about, there's a bid notice from UNOC. That notice said they were looking for a service provider who would do, they would exhume, relocate, and bury the remains of people in the Kabalega Industrial Park. And it just got me thinking that when we live, we think we have time, we think we are invincible, we think that we have power, and that suddenly, while I was reading that article, these people were nothing. There was no reference made to the human beings. They were remains, and that's what they called them. And so, I said that to say that we don't have forever. Ultimately, what matters, I mean, all of us someday are going to be called. Ultimately, what matters is how do you create impact that outlives your physical body? And what relationships do you create to make sure that there's someone several years later, we can talk about Mulwana, Mukwano, Madivan on one spectrum, and we know the successful stories, but we can know for sure that those people are not in that place by chance, that they were very intentional, they were planning and doing everything to make sure that their legacy lives on. On the other side, you have the Zimwe family, currently Garuga, Aponye. We have more stories on this side, yeah? And we read those stories and say, how can the Garuga family be arguing? So, we have work to do.
Yeah. Allow me 2 questions before I open it up to the audience. Complicated situations. Let me bring my friend Josh into it. I see he's running off. So cohabiting couples. Blended families, children from different relationships. So how does the Ugandan succession law treat them? And what does someone in such a situation, one of those, need to do proactively?
Your question is very kind because it stops on the children. And the law, thankfully, has given legal recognition to all children, regardless of your circumstances of birth. So for as long as you are a lineal descendant of someone, you have their blood, you're entitled to that estate.
So DNA is...
DNA then becomes relevant. For as long as I can prove that I'm a lineal descendant, I'm entitled to receive some sort of benefit from my parents' estate. The complication from blended families comes when it comes to the parties, the adults involved, mistresses, and people who don't have a formal legal relationship, yeah? Because the law is such that they will only recognize the spouse. And spouse for legal purposes means someone married in a manner recognized by the laws of Uganda. So it's either church, civil, traditional, Islamic marriage, cohabitation on its own, regardless of how long you do it, does not give you any right. So now imagine you're building this family with this person, you're having children, and the moment you pass on, if you've not left a will, they're left bare. Because all we'll do, if this is the mother and these are the children, we're going to eliminate her and say you belong nowhere in this conversation, save for information's sake, and let's deal with the children and what they're entitled to.
Yeah, that's dire. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit of ground. I guess to close it off, at least this form of the question bit. If someone walks out of this room tonight and actually does something about it, what are the 3 things you'll tell them to do in order of importance as well, and sequencing, I guess?
So the 3 things. One is I would urge you to take stock of what you have. Do that inventory. Take stock of what you have. What are your assets? What are your liabilities? At least have one document that has all that. The second one is do your life cycle analysis, so that you know that whatever you're doing today has consequences in the future and how that will play out. Lastly, have your will done. It doesn't have to be complicated, but have something written that spells out your wishes.
All right, thank you. Thanks for that. I'll open it up to the audience. Just put up your hand if you have a question, and Carol over there will bring a mic to you. Do you want to pass this particular one on, or?
Yeah, thank you so much for the conversation. So if you look at their infrastructure, there is a concept of family office and a trust. So I get so much confused on what exactly should I set up, a family office or a trust? Thank you.
Okay, so a family office for businesses that have or families that have several layers. You have children, you have businesses, you have grandchildren, you have several descendants, and multiple businesses. You realize that you will depend heavily on professionals to run that kind of estate. You can no longer just use the nearest uncle or cousin. You really have to find professionals to help you run the show. The family office is what brings those professionals together. So usually you will have an accountant, you will have a lawyer, you may have, if you have a big estate, you might have an estate manager, yeah? And what these people are doing is to support the trust. Let's say you have a trust, because the trust has the trustees who have the big mandate to run with these assets, but you need people to help you implement below them. So more like how you'd have the board of directors and then you have the executive, operations team. So that's what the family office does. It brings together all the professionals. It will, for some families which are big, you'll even have resources, you'll have meeting rooms, basically to centralize all the services around the management of your estate.
Okay, thank you for the conversation again. My question is a bit of a curveball. You've been talking about families and inheritance along the linear line, but imagine a scenario where somebody is an adult, is not under the supervision of parents, has amassed some kind of wealth, and has no children, and then passes away. How is that estate handled without a will?
So they have no children, they have no spouse, but they have wealth. We've actually dealt with something like that. So when you die without beneficiaries, without a spouse or without children, we go to the next layer of your relatives. So this could be your siblings, grandparents, uncles. They will line up for your assets. And so there are two families. One we got letters of administration for. The beauty is that for her, she had done a draft will, but it had not been signed. In there, she had already distributed. She said this portion should go to this church, this one to these siblings, and so they distributed that. The challenge with that kind of estate is that the Administrator General is likely to want to be involved personally as an administrator, because again, they say that you don't have someone direct, and they want to make sure that there's fairness in the distribution and all that. But it's possible to leave that wealth, so you leave it to your nearest family members. Yeah. And so in terms of estate planning, where should you bother with all these things? Again, it depends on what your ambition is and what your vision is. It could be that, for like this person I've shared, for them, giving to community was important. So they were able to give to a total church and another church and to all these people because they had an instrument that the people who had survived could use, and then give to all the other beneficiaries. So even then you need to do your estate.
Yeah, the mic is here. Thank you, Biggie, for a very personal example. I want to start off by thanking Shisa Nyama. Thank you, Ham, for this second edition. Thank you, Damalie, for making time past your bedtime of 8 p.m. My question, I know we focus on the legal aspect a lot, but there's something you talked about, the will of life. And we are a very religious nation by nature. So my question is, what challenges are you facing as a firm, or what plans do you have to bridge the gap? And what role can religious institutions play in convincing the individual and dragging people to get that courage? Because we've had examples of stories of people giving their life savings to a church because the pastor said something. The afterlife seems to be a big role, but what are you playing? How do you bridge that gap between the powerful religious institutions in the country, me, I belong to a Toto church, for example. I might have a bigger inclination to my church. Women especially believe their pastors more than their husbands sometimes. So you have scenarios like that. How do you bridge a gap as a firm that say, like, listen, we have this institution in the country, religion, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Christian, whether you're saved, whether you're Protestant. How do you convince, or how do we move that message to the pulpit and make pastors talk about, yes, there's the afterlife, but once your afterlife happens, there's people here living the real life? That's my first question. Second question is, Ham started off by talking about your footprint in the region. How do you convince, because we're talking about preservation of wealth and estate, but there's a growth aspect to it. So growth aspect could come from tax reasons. How do you guys bridge the gap of tax-related reasons of saying offshore accounts? How do you advise certain clients and say, yes, you have this in Uganda, but if I did a holding company in Mauritius or somewhere to buy these shares in Uganda, there's this X amount of taxes that you'd save by not being under URA's foothold. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant questions. So the first one is around the religious leaders and involving them in the conversation. I must say that, we have a mountain to climb when it comes to estate planning. But what have we done as a firm? Last year, we organized the first ever estate planning symposium in the country. And why did we do that? We wanted to bring together like-minded people to have conversations like this. And of course, we invited several people. This year, we have the same estate planning symposium where we're going to bring together professionals answering part of the questions you guys have. And the idea behind that is recognizing that we all have a part to play when it comes to estate planning. That we'll have that symposium, it's going to unlock certain mental blocks, but also that then, we've invited the churches and all these people to participate. But also for me, you say you're Watoto, I go to Watoto as well, and we're told that the marketplace is where your ministry is. And so those of you who are here, it's if all of us preached the message and said, guys, we need to write our wills, we need to plan better, then the message is going to sort of eventually sink. Of course, when it comes to people taking advantage of others, I think that's a different debate altogether. We know that it can happen. In some churches, indeed it happens, but it's a much bigger conversation to have than we have time for. When it comes to tax planning, again, it really depends on the kind of estate that you have. So the offshore accounts might make sense for a company that is operating in different jurisdictions, because we know that you're taxed based on residence. That's the starting point. So for all intents and purposes, for as long as you qualify to be a resident of Uganda, you pay taxes on the income you've received. Yeah? So, we've had cases where people will say, I've registered a company in Mauritius, but then operation-wise, you're structured as though you are a resident company. You won't get the benefits. But there are cases where you have groups of companies where you're going to say, we're going to get financing from this jurisdiction, it's going to move to Mauritius, and then this is how it's going to trickle down. So there's a lot of intricate planning that goes into that. Of course, you benefit from the tax incentives and benefits that come from that structuring, but it really needs to be customized based on the kind of business you run and to what extent your operations are locally based or regionally based.
I think Kathy had a question over there. Then we'll come back this side.
Yes, I wanted to ask, on several occasions, we mention a next of kin on our documents. I can give you an example like NSSF or your insurance. To what extent is that next of kin legally binding, especially maybe in cases where you didn't have a will? Thank you.
Interesting. So the next of kin is like how you have RSVP on a card. So It simply means, in case you fail to find me, call this number. But it does not mean I've given you any powers as the next of kin. So it's not enough for you to list the next of kin. You still must have an instrument, like a power of attorney while you're alive, or a will which prescribes who your beneficiaries are. Yes. So a next of kin is really your contact person in the event that they can't get you. Nothing else. Yes.
While you're running there, I had a question that came in. My spouse doesn't want to talk about this. How do I start the conversation?
We know about change management. I mean, this conversation can be, I mean, at a personal level, you see that people struggle to even start having the conversation with themselves. So one is you need to understand your partner. You need to understand why they don't even want to talk about it. Is it complicated? Are they scared? Do they have stuff to hide? Again, you really have to think through the whole scenario. And this is not something you're going to force someone to do. Because even when we are doing the will, it says that I am doing this without any undue influence, coercion. I'm doing it voluntarily. So you really have to use your skills of persuasion to get your partner around this. It's by sharing examples of what's happening. It's by doing your part. Because guess what? When you die, there's no such thing as a joint will. So even if you love each other so much, you can't have one will as a couple. Everyone will have their own. So do your part. Start by doing your part, and then convince them to come along with a conversation.
Damalie, thank you so much for this really amazing presentation. Now, to bring it practically to Uganda, what are those wealth management portfolios that you see working in Uganda, knowing what we have around the legal frameworks, the financing products in the market, the recent UAPs and old mutuals?
Yes.
What's working for Ugandans? Because from where I sit, a lot of people don't really know where to go.
Yes. Good question. So the products available in the market, there are so many products available in the market. Again, it depends on your estate and your willingness to gather information. So we can start with unit trusts. I think now, by now, we all should know about unit trusts. What advantage do they have? Even from an estate planning point of view, they are very easy to manage. I did a will where the person barely had any physical assets. They just had unit trusts and bonds. And so even when they were saying we need to create a trust, for them it was going to be an easy trust to manage because the returns are clear, the coupons are known when they will come in, and so it's just for scheduling and distributing. So unit trusts are one of the assets you can have for their liquidity and easy access. Bonds, we know about treasury bonds. They are a good store of value as well. You know that again, I did another one where this person had bonds and he said every child is going to have one bond. The principal is going to fall due in about 20 years. So he knew that with his coupons, he's able to pay school fees, he's able to meet the expenses of the family. So he was planning alongside the different bonds that he had. We have education plans with insurance companies again. And I think ICA and Prudential have those where you can even plan with the school and the parent and say that every now and then this money should go directly to the school, and that is managed. So there is that. There is an interesting one, which is the annuities. And annuities is good for people who need to plan for old age. So yes, you have your NSSF, you have your pension, but annuities enables you to save a particular sum, and you're guaranteed, because most of us, when you get to the point of retirement, Your biggest worry is, how am I going to sustain myself? I've been getting a salary every single month. So with the annuities products, you know that every month you will have your salary for as long as your policy stipulates. So there is that as well. Of course, the usual real estate. You can invest in stocks as well, both here and outside of Uganda. Again, we know that the real value in stocks is on how long you keep your investment in the company. And so you know you're going to get dividends every 6 months, or depending on the company. Again, you've stored your money there. So again, it really depends on the kind of estate you have, the resources available, and where your mind is at and your needs.
David.
Thank you, Damalie, for the very enlightening presentation. The first question is very direct. It is whether the family charter is a legally recognized instrument. Then the second one is to do with confidentiality. What your own sense is of legal firms providing the confidentiality necessary for this very delicate situation. Because I also notice, for example, I always tease out this question: have you written a will? And you find many people haven't written a will. Sometimes I reflect and think, who do I want to witness my will? Like, how reliable are they, even from a confidentiality standpoint? And I'm saying this because I've witnessed 2 wills. One of them, the guy is a very techie guy, so he gave me half of the code to his will. And he told me who has the other half. The other one gave me, we signed off the will. Then somewhere there were a few changes in their family situation, and then he asked me to return the will. So I returned the will anyway. So that is the second aspect to do with confidentiality. The third is about effort. Because we are talking, like, all this estate planning to me is a bit reactive or reactionary. Meaning the proactive way is to empower all these potential beneficiaries to be productive, and they don't need to rely on an estate because they have their own means. And for all it matters, you would rather hand over the estate to a foundation or gift it to a charity. One of the cultural leaders has been talking so much about okujungula. They call it to raise good children instead of planning to give them an estate. Like, you educate them well instead of trying to give them an estate. So what would you say about that, the role of effort? Because otherwise then you have people who are just there seated waiting for a gift or a benefit. Thanks.
Sorry, please remind me what the first one was.
A family charter,
Family
whether
charter,
it is a legal, whether it's a legally recognized instrument, or it's a guide. It's a guide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the second is to do with confidentiality, and the third is about effort.
So the family charter our legal framework has not advanced to legally prescribe. There's no statute in Uganda where you're going to find a family charter. However, under the contractual framework, the contracts law, 2 people can sit and agree on something, and it can be legally binding. So from a contractual point of view, as family members, you can sit and resolve that this is what we are going to do, and that can be binding. Of course, remember that when it comes to family relations, it's mutual love and affection. So in terms of consideration, It's not something you can easily enforce and say, I said we must have Christmas in this home all the time. If I rebel, it's difficult to enforce it. But at least you would have people that are aligned who will say that this is what we agreed. And I think informally we sort of do that, where people will have a family meeting and things are said and you have consensus on this is what we're going to do as a family. And it can be enforced even without putting pen to paper. When it comes to confidentiality, I think that you have valid concerns. That's why you can't just pick any random person to do your will or to do this kind of work for you. From a legal point of view, if you're a lawyer, you are bound by the laws, yeah? So that's something you can actually enforce. But when it comes to witnessing of wills, the law doesn't actually require the witnesses to read the contents of the will. All that it requires is that we must see the person signing, and we must be able to confirm that when they did that, they were not in a bar drinking something and that they were mentally incapacitated. As long as we can say we met on this day and we saw him signing, that should suffice, and the circumstances surrounding that signature. So in terms of confidentiality, because again, the reason I want to believe the law has not extended that burden of full disclosure to the witnesses is because when you read people's wills, they open up your eyes to things you shouldn't see, because it's their private life anyway. So unless you're willing for them to see, they don't really have to see. And if you want, there are people who will say, I want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement before you go ahead to even participate as a witness. Reactive as opposed to productive, it depends. I mean, like I said, life is about choices. There's what they call the short sleeves theory. That you see how you think that you have built this wealth, your children should not be partaking of it. Guess what? There's someone who started that journey you're on. Your parents took you to school. They educated you, so you're now in a better place. Before your parents, there was someone. Maybe they were not giving your father the exact thing that your father has given you, but there was contribution. So then you start to realize that it would be selfish for you to want that growth to end with you, because there are challenges that your grandparents had, and because of that they had their own limitations, even in terms of how much wealth they could transfer. Same for your parents. And so the short sleeve theory says that most people can't live beyond 3 generations. So you have the first rural community, the second one which tries, you have a house, you have a few chickens and cows, and then there is this one who comes to town. He has a home in town, he has a home in the village. And it said that how he raises his children determines whether they will go back to the grandfather's level or progress beyond him and build on top of the wealth that he has accumulated. So if for you, you want your children to go back to zero, where your grandparents started, then you can afford to say, it's okay, do your own things. If children are really productive, in the way you say, raise them well, teach them, give them skills, build character, then you can't find a place where you're saying, I won't give you my wealth, because you've equipped them and that they're prepared to grow this wealth. So you want a scenario where, because you've done your part as a parent, you don't want them to start from scratch, start a new business. When you have a business, what can they do to transform this particular business? And so for me, that's the mindset I would have. Yeah.
Okay. Is there one more? Last one? I'm cautious of time. If not, then... there's a gentleman over there. Okay.
Thank you very much. Mine is nothing related to the content for the day. It's to the organizers of this forum. I'm just wondering why there's not many more of us here. It's a very interesting conversation. I also realize that I think the audience that would be interested in this is maybe 1-2 layers above this. What is it that we can do to market this forum to people that would be making sense of it, because it's very, very interesting conversation, and I think that we need to have efforts to get more people into these seats, listen to this, because it benefits all of us. But again, listening in, I think this 10 years ago, this wouldn't have made sense to me. Now, it makes a lot of sense. So, to the organizers of this, we need to be specific on the audience that we market this to make sure that we are filling these seats when these conversations are happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is this on? Okay. So yeah, the audience, I guess this is for me, not for you. The audience is, I think we are all in the pocket. If we're not yet there, we are getting there. I think the youngest guy, Roger, some of these things have touched him very personally. We started the night to be able to have these meaningful conversations about topics we never really get to speak about as openly and as candidly as we have today. In terms of why there are not many people, your guess is as good as mine. Last week, unfortunately, there wasn't. The last one, we had a lot more people. Maybe it was the first one. We have ED tomorrow. You don't know how that affects people and everything, but you are ambassadors. So you've come, you've experienced. Please spread the word when we reach out post event. Give us, first of all, the topics you want to talk about. And we're all people of a certain age. I'm trying to look. So we have common interests. I think as we grow older, as we get into our own, start planning for our kids and all, there are certain topics we need to be talking about that we don't get to. So all this to say, be our ambassadors and tell it over the mountains, right? So with that, I'd like to thank you. Damalie, another question?
Well,
are you disputing what I'm saying?
No, I don't think she got a chance to explain the event, the upcoming event.
Yeah, I'm going to give her a chance. Yes, thank you. Yes, so I just wanted to thank you for, first of all, accepting as soon as I basically dropped you the line. For me, this is a topic that I've been thinking about. I know I have an appointment with you that I've been dodging for the last I don't know how many months. But this is very educative. I think what I've gone away with, the biggest thing for me came at the end, where you told my friend Mutabanura that it would be a shame if the progress that started with his great-grandfather ended with him. So much as you don't want your kids to be leeches or to be entitled and just wait for things to be handed to them, we all stand on the shoulders of others. So I think Okugunjula, maybe you raise them in a way that they don't become entitled. Expose them to the things you're doing, the hard work you're putting in and everything, so they don't take things for granted. And I think a takeaway for me is also that estate planning is not even just about what happens when you die. It's about how you live the later part of your years, because the things you do now have a very big bearing on what will happen to you later, how people treat you, the people most closest to you, and that sort of thing. So thank you very much for the talk. I know you are one of the leading, if not the leading, sort of voices as Tara advocates in this space. And I know you have an event coming up, as my friend Paul Ekudu, who's no longer listening, mentioned, that I should give you the chance to speak about the event. We have the poster coming up, but it might not be legible. But we can send out a flyer on your behalf as we do the post-event. But I'll give you a chance to speak about it.
Paul, you're very kind. You're looking out for me. Thank you. The symposium, as I talked about it briefly, is happening on the 16th of July at Arang. And there's a lot lined up. I'm excited as an organizer, so I can only imagine if you attended what you would be able to receive. So in terms of the flow of the event, we have Tara opening up and laying the context to estate planning. Then we have Dr. Muvawala of National Planning Authority, who will come to tell us, as a country, this is what Uganda is planning. How does that translate into your personal estate plan? Why does it matter? So what things should we invest in? such conversations. He's giving the keynote address. We have the Minister of Lands coming to share what's happening in the land space, because we've recognized that real estate is one of the stores of value in this country. So she's coming to talk about real estate. You will ask her questions about the challenges you're facing in that regard. But also trusts are under her mandate. And so things around policy reform and advocacy and all these questions you have about trusts and whether they are a viable tool for estate planning in this country, she'll be able to address that in her address. We're also launching the Estate Planning Association, which is already registered. It's a community of lawyers, arbitrators, coaches, real estate agents, professionals that are interested in this conversation. So it's already registered, but we'll be officially unveiling that. Then we have a family panel, which we're really excited about. So last year we had one family that, the father, son, and mother were sharing how they've done this business and how they are transitioning. This time, it's a much deeper conversation because we have 4 families that will be sharing. We have Jaffa of Fairway, who is going to give the Indian perspective. How are they able to do these family businesses and do them well? But we also know what he's done with Fairway, how they've diversified into Cocoa Beach, Sambia Lodge, and they seem to be doing really well. We have Patricia Karugaba of Nina Interiors, who will be giving the Ugandan perspective of actual transition from a business point of view. What her mother did, what she's doing, and her siblings, what they're doing at Nina Interiors. We have Patience Mohanji. Mohanji is the widow and administrator to Mohanji, the rally driver, but also behind Horizon Coaches. And she's sharing the ladies' perspective. What happens when you suddenly lose your husband and you have to deal with the dynamics of the relatives, but also an equally very large estate. And they seem to be doing well. The estate seems to still be growing. We have Don Patrick Bujingo, who is the administrator of her mother's estate, Aloysia Organics. His mother died suddenly. He's then left with this responsibility of taking care of his siblings and also the business, and he's been able to do a good job with that. So that's the family panel. As you can tell, the conversation is going to be really deep and interesting. Then we have the professionals panel, which has KPMG that will be sharing the tax perspective to estate planning. We have Knight Frank that will be sharing real estate. How do you manage real estate? What issues are involved in that? We have Robert Chirunda who will be sharing the legal perspective. And then we have a gentleman called Peter. He comes from Kenya. He is the head of ICA Lion Trust Company, which is their corporate trust entity in Kenya, and he's coming to share their perspectives, how they've supported these families in Kenya and what they're planning to do in Uganda. We have Alan Taebwe of Gold Mine Finance around financial literacy, but he also runs a family business. And so as you can tell, it's an action-packed full-day event. So we will start at 7:30, have a lunch break, and then we'll finish at about 4. So come one, come all, as we used to say.
Thank you very much. Where do you sign up? Does it cost anything, or important details?
Important details, sorry. So between now and 15th June, it costs only 200,000. And that gives you access to all the materials, the speakers, and the meals. After June 15th, it's going to be 250. You can buy a table for your organization, for your family at just 2 million shillings. There's a link that QR code can be scanned, but I'll also share it with Ham so that he can share in the groups for you to sign up. It will lead you to IoTech platform where you can pay, and then you will get all the details and give you the rest of the details about the event.
All right. So, Shisha Nyama is especially proud to have you as a guest, so I'll ask our partner, Mr. Donald Kapongo, to come give a vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
On behalf of the organization, Shisa Nyama, I would like to express our heartfelt thanks to you, Damalie, for accepting to come and present to us and the rest of the audience. And breaking it down to the extent that my neighbors are now thinking about writing a will. To you, the audience, we'll be here the dates are going to change, the days are going to change. But for now, it's every Tuesday. Sorry, every last Tuesday of the month. You're most welcome. We'll keep sharing the topics. For those that are interested, invite your friends. The gentleman that said that why isn't this place full? It's not full because you guys have not invited friends. So the next time you come, please come with 4 people. Thank you very much.
Tara Advocates came with some goodies to give out. I don't know what criteria you're going to use to give out, but that one I'll leave to you. So just go ahead and, do you need me to help you hand, or how are you going to do it?
So unknown to you, there was a judge. And so I'm going to ask my partner, Alan, to do the honors of choosing who gets the special Tara gifts. Yeah. So over to you, Alan.
For me, I'm going to choose one person that stood out for me. They had a notebook. Even when their meal came, guys, I saw them jotting down. So for me, that person takes, I think, the top prize. And so the gentleman in a suit and a white shirt, you are, yeah, you stood out for us. Okay, the second one goes out to the person who looked out for us. We all know who that person is. They kept saying, we've not had something about the symposium. So, Paul. Yes, you also stood out for us this evening. Okay, the third person is going to be Josh for us. I think all of us now know Josh. For every example, they picked on him. And so, Josh, we used you to make our points, to take our points home. So we learned about all the things. Watoto boy, please. Please come. Okay, we are a female-led law firm, and there's a lady complaining, and because you're speaking out for yourself, you win a prize, lady. Clearly, that evening started off by meeting someone we had met in the past, and she made our evening even before we started. So, Kathy, you're the next prize.
That table was taken. No, that's all right.
Okay, so this table seems to be winning, but there's a table of people who are concentrating, and they were very attentive. So there's a lady from that table that asked a question. You win a prize this evening. Please come over. Oh, Mabel. Then from this corner to this corner, there was a question that came in. Okay, it was a comment that came in from this side. Sir, you win a prize. you, yes.
It's going to be our ambassador.
So for the final prize, was Josh the youngest person we mentioned? Roger. So the youngest person in the room, Roger. Yeah.
You get your thing before it changes. Please give a big, big hand clap to Damalie and the Tara Advocates team. Of course, you've heard about the symposium coming up. We'll be sharing that information as we also gather post-event feedback. So thank you for coming out on a Tuesday. You may now enjoy your pre-Eid celebrations. Thank you very much.